I was born into great wealth, not monetary wealth, but instead the wealth of a loving family, a family that fostered my curiosity and encouraged me to dream big. My mom, Jackie, had me when she was a 17-year-old high school student in Albuquerque. Being pregnant in high school was not popular. The school tried to kick her out, but she was allowed to finish after my grandfather negotiated terms with the principal. She couldn't have a locker, no extracurriculars, and couldn't walk across the stage to get her diploma. She graduated and was determined to continue her education, so she enrolled in night school, bringing me, her infant son, to class with her throughout. My dad's name is Miguel. He adopted me when I was 4. He was 16 when he came to the US from Cuba by himself shortly after Castro took over. My dad didn't speak English, and he did not have an easy path. What he did have was grit and determination. He received a scholarship to college in Albuquerque, which is where he met my mom. Together with my grandparents, these hardworking, resourceful, and loving people made me who I am. I walked away from a steady job on Wall Street into a Seattle garage to found Amazon, fully understanding that it might not work. It feels like just yesterday I was driving the packages to the post office myself, dreaming that one day we might afford a forklift. Customer obsession has driven our success, and I take it as an article of faith that customers notice when you do the right thing. You earn trust slowly, over time, by doing hard things well, delivering on time, offering everyday low prices, making promises and keeping them, and making principled decisions, even when they are unpopular. And our approach is working. 80% of Americans have a favorable impression of Amazon overall. Who do Americans trust more than Amazon to do the right thing? Only their doctors and the military. The retail market we participate in is extraordinarily large and competitive. Amazon accounts for less than 1% of the $25 trillion global retail market and less than 4% of US retail. There's room in retail for multiple winners. We compete against large, established players like Target, Costco, Kroger, and of course, Walmart, a company more than twice Amazon's size. 20 years ago, we made the decision to invite other sellers to sell in our store, to share the same valuable real estate we spent billions to build, market, and maintain. We believe that combining the strengths of Amazon's store with the vast selection of products offered by third parties would be a better experience for customers, and that the growing pie of revenue and profits would be big enough for all. We were betting that it was not a zero-sum game. Fortunately, we were right. There are now 1.7 million small and medium-sized businesses selling on Amazon. The trust customers put in us every day has allowed Amazon to create more jobs in the United States over the past decade than any other company. Hundreds of thousands of jobs across 42 states. Amazon employees make a minimum of $15 an hour, more than double the federal minimum wage. And we offer the best benefits that include comprehensive health insurance, 401k retirement, and parental leave, which includes 20 weeks of paid maternity leave. More than any place on earth, entrepreneurial companies start, grow, and thrive here in the US. We nurture entrepreneurs and startups with stable rule of law, the finest university system in the world, the freedom of democracy, and a deeply accepted culture of risk-taking. Of course, this great nation of ours is far from perfect. Even as we remember Congressman John Lewis and honor his legacy, we're in the middle of a much-needed race reckoning. We also face the challenges of climate change and income inequality, and we're stumbling through the crisis of a global pandemic. Still, with all of our faults and problems, the rest of the world would love even the tiniest sip of the elixir we have here in the US. Immigrants like my dad see what a treasure this country is. They have perspective and often can see it even more clearly than those of us who were lucky enough to be born here. It is still day one for this country, and even in the face of today's humbling challenges, I have never been more optimistic about our future. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'm very happy to take your questions.
For yielding. Mr. Bezos, we were cut short in our last discussion. I just wanted to give you the chance to clear this up. You don't believe Dr. Ben Carson is an extremist, do you?
No, sir, I don't.
So help me understand why you would partner with a group that labels him as someone worthy of an extremist watch list.
Well, I want you to hopefully appreciate when we're trying to make it possible for people to donate to any number of from millions of different charities. And we need to have some source of data to use. And while I accept what you're saying, that the Southern Poverty Law Center and the U.S. Foreign Asset Office are not perfect, and I would like a better source if we could get it, that is what we use today.
Well, that's breaking news. It's great to hear that you do recognize the infirmities in the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm going to move on with my final 90 seconds, Mr. Bezos. I am deeply moved by your personal story. I am not here accusing you as someone who would ever traffic in hate, but it seems you have empowered people who do. And I'm particularly talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which you allow to dictate who can receive donations on your Amazon Smile platform, have said the Catholic Family News, Catholic Family Ministries, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, the American Family Association, the Family Research Council, the Jewish Defense League, and even Dr. Ben Carson are extremists and should be treated differently. Dr. Carson is on the cabinet and is one of the most renowned minds in America. I'm just wondering why you would place your confidence in a group that seems to be so out of step and seems to take mainstream Christian doctrine and label it as hate.
Sir, it's a good question. We have, for those of you who don't know what Amazon Smile is, it's a program that allows customers to designate a certain fraction of their purchases to go to charity that we then pay for. And they can select from any one of millions of charities. And we use the Southern Poverty Law Center data to say which charities are extremist organizations. We also use the U.S. Foreign Asset Office to do the same thing.
But those why? Two together. Since they're calling the Catholics and these Jewish groups hateful groups, why would you trust them?
I'm going to acknowledge this is an imperfect system, and
no doubt.
I would love suggestions on better or additional sources.
My suggestion would be a divorce from the SPLC, and I see that I'm out of time, and I yield back.
Mr. Bezos, earlier my colleague brought up what I think is an important issue, and they were discussing Amazon's stated policy against using third-party seller information to inform business decisions regarding Amazon's private label brands. Ms. Jayapal specifically noted that possible loophole that allows Amazon to review non-public aggregate data to inform private brands, even in instances where there are only a few third-party sellers. I just want to drill down on that just a little more. Where exactly does Amazon draw the line?
I'm sorry, aggregate data would be in more than one seller. Okay. And of course, you have to remember that the person seeing the report would have no way of knowing how many sellers are inside that group or what the breakdown would be between those sellers. So, and I would remind you that it's not that different from perhaps a bestseller list or a product ranking, which we do make public for all.
And I just want to be clear, does Amazon allow the use of aggregate data to inform private label Amazon brands when there are only 3 sellers for a product?
Yes, sir.
Does Amazon look at aggregate data when there are only 2 sellers of a product?
Yes, sir.
And am I correct in my understanding that Amazon is conducting an internal investigation on the use of third-party data?
Yes, we're basically trying to understand some of the anecdotes that we saw in the Wall Street Journal article.
Will you commit to informing this committee on the outcome of that investigation, including on the exact circumstances of when Amazon is allowed to view and/or use aggregate data?
Yes, we will do that.
And now I want to move, just really quick, music can be used to drive revenue, and obviously there's a reason it's important, and I want to talk about Twitch for a second. News reports have indicated that Twitch users are receiving notice and takedown requests pursuant to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. My understanding is that Twitch allows users to stream music but does not license the music. Is that correct?
I'm going to have to ask that I could get back to your office with an answer to that question. I don't know.
Okay, and then, well, so that would be great. And then, so I just have 2 more questions related to that. If Twitch is responding to DMCA notice and takedown requirements, should Twitch consider proactively licensing music instead of retroactively adhering to those notices? So these are the questions we're interested in. I'm primarily concerned about small up and coming musicians, different people that aren't necessarily labels, to make it as easy for them to at least get cease and desist notices out as well. And as we continue to move forward there.
Yes, Congressman, that's an important issue, and I understand it, and I will get back to your office on that.
Mr. Bezos, in July 2019, your employee, Nate Sutton, told me under oath in this committee that Amazon does not, quote, use any specific seller data when creating its own private brand product. So let me ask you, Mr. Bezos, does Amazon ever access and use third-party seller data when making business decisions? And just a yes or no will suffice, sir.
I thank you for the question. I know it's an important topic, and I also want to thank you for representing us. I can't answer that question yes or no. What I can tell you is we have a policy against using seller-specific data to aid our private label business, but I can't guarantee you that that policy has never been violated.
Mr. Bezos, you're probably aware that an April 2020 report in the Wall Street Journal revealed that your company does access data on third-party sellers, both by reviewing data on popular individual sellers and products and by creating tiny product categories that allowed your company to categorically access detailed seller information in a supposedly aggregate category. Do you deny that report?
I'm familiar with the Wall Street Journal article that you're talking about, and we continue to look into that very carefully. I'm not yet satisfied that we've gotten to the bottom of it, and we're going to keep looking at it.
Okay.
It's not as easy to do as you would think, because some of the sources in the article are anonymous, but we continue to look into it.
I'll take that as you're not denying that, you're looking into it. I will tell you, a former Amazon employee in third-party sales and recruitment told this committee, quote, "There's a rule, but there's nobody enforcing or spot checking. They just say, don't help yourself to the data. It's a candy shop. Everyone can have access to anything they want." Do category managers have access to non-public data about third-party products and businesses?
Here's what I can tell you. That we do have certain safeguards in place. We train people on the policy. We expect people to follow that policy the same way we would any other. It's a voluntary policy. As far as I'm aware, no other retailer limits their use of data at all.
There's no actual enforcement. There's no actual enforcement of that policy. So it's voluntary and there's no actual enforcement. So maybe that answers my...
Sorry. No, I think I may have misspoke. I'm trying to say that the fact that we have such a policy is voluntary. I think no other retailer even has such a policy.
Well,
our
that's
enforcement of that policy. We would treat that like any internal policy, and if we found that someone violated it, we would take action against them.
Well, there's numerous reports, and the committee has conducted interviews with former employees who confirm that there are employees who do have access to that data and are using it. And so my next question was going to be, if you thought you were actually enforcing these rules, do you think that that's working? And again, I would just say that there's credible reporting that's documented breaches of these rules that you have put into place. And the committee has interviewed employees that typically say that these breaches typically occur. Let's talk about aggregate data for a minute. Your rules do allow for you to access combined data on a product when there are only one or two sellers in the marketplace, correct?
Yes, aggregate data is allowed under our policies. That is correct.
Okay. And interviews with former employees have made it clear that that aggregate data essentially allows access to highly detailed data in those product categories. There's the example of Fortem, a small business that had no direct competitors except for Amazon Warehouse Deals, a resale clearance account that only sold 17 units. An Amazon employee accessed a detailed sales report on Fortem's product with information on how much the company spent on advertising per unit and the cost to ship each trunk. And then Amazon launched its own competing products in October 2019. That's a major loophole, and I go back to the General Counsel's statement to this committee very clearly that there was no access to this data, that Amazon does not use that data for its own benefit. And I'm now hearing you say, well, you're not so sure that that's going on. And the issue that we're concerned with here is very simple. You have access to data that far exceeds the sellers on your platforms with whom you compete. You can track consumer habits, interests, even what consumers clicked on but then didn't buy. You have access to the entirety of sellers' pricing and inventory information, past, present, and future, and you dictate the participation of third-party sellers on your platform. So you can set the rules of the game for your competitors, but not actually follow those same rules for yourself. Do you think that's fair to the mom and pop third-party businesses who are trying to sell on your platform?
I appreciate that question, and I like it a lot because I really want a chance to address that. I'm very proud of what we've done for third-party sellers on this platform. We started our third-party platform 20 years ago, and we had 0 sellers on it.
The question
eBay
I'm asking, I'm sorry,
one.
I'm so sorry, my time is expiring, and the question I wanted to ask you is that you have access to data that your competitors do not have. So you might allow third-party sellers onto your platform, but if you're continuously monitoring the data to make sure that they're never going to get big enough that they can compete with you, that is actually the concern that the committee has. And, you know, I think your company started in my district. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the work that you've done, and say that the whole goal of this committee's work is to make sure that there are more Amazons, that there are more Apples, that there are more companies that get to innovate and small businesses get to thrive. And that is what we're trying to get at. That is why we need to regulate these marketplaces so that no company has a platform so dominant that it is essentially a monopoly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bezos, you referred to third-party sellers today as Amazon's partners and that your success depends on their success. But over the past year, we've heard a completely different story. As part of this investigation, we've interviewed many small businesses, and they use the words like bullying, fear, and panic to describe their relationship with Amazon. I'm going to share the story of a small business owner who is also a wife and a mother, so you can understand how this is actually affecting the lives of everyday people and why this truly matters.
We were a top bookseller on Amazon.com, and we worked day and night very hard towards growing our business and maintaining a 5-star feedback rating. Most importantly, this business feeds a total of 14 people, which includes 3 children and one 90-year-old granny. And as we grew, we were shrinking Amazon's market share in the textbooks category. So now in retaliation, Amazon started restricting us from selling. They started with a few titles in early 2019, and within 6 months, Amazon systematically blocked us from selling the full textbook category. We haven't sold a single book from the past 10 months or probably more. We were never given a reason. Amazon didn't even provide us with a notice as to why we were being restricted. There was no warning. There was no plan.
So, Mr. Bezos, after Amazon just delisted the small business without any apparent reason or notice, she told us that they sent more than 500 separate communications to Amazon, including to you, Mr. Bezos, over the past year. There was not a single meaningful response. Do you think this is an acceptable way to treat someone that you described as both a partner and a customer?
No, Congresswoman, and I appreciate you showing me that anecdote, and I would like to talk to her. It does not at all to me seem like the right way to treat her. And I'm surprised by that. And it's not the systematic approach that we take, I can assure you. I don't even understand what's going on in that anecdote, because we would love for third-party sellers to sell books on the website.
Sir.
So I don't understand it, but I would like to understand it better. And with your permission, I would like to get in touch with your office.
I think, though, that you're missing the point. This is not just about one business. You know, I'm concerned that this is a pattern of behavior, and basically this pattern of behavior has to change. Mr. Bezos, my question is simply, are you willing to make sure going forward that, you know, the numerous sellers that we've talked to, they have problems just like this? And there are more sellers who have told us that they've exhausted all of their options before finally reaching out to you directly as a last resort, but they're still waiting for your response. So what do you have to say to the small businesses who are talking to Congress because you simply won't listen to them?
Well, I say that's not acceptable. If we aren't listening to you, I'm not happy about that at all. But I would, if you allow me to disagree a little bit with a piece of this, I do not think that's systematically what's going on. And the evidence that I would suggest would be useful for you to consider in that regard is that third-party sellers in aggregate are doing extremely well on Amazon. They grew from 20 years ago it was 0. And today, it's 60% of sales. Third-party sellers are growing even faster than first-party retail.
Mr. Bezos, thank you so much. You said that sellers have many other attractive options to reach customers, but that's not at all what we found in our investigation. According to eMarketer, a source Amazon cited in submissions to this committee, Amazon has nearly 7 times the market share of its closest e-commerce competitor. One seller told us that, and I quote, Amazon continues to be the only show in town. No matter how angry sellers get, they have nowhere else to go. So are you saying that these people aren't being truthful when they say that Amazon is the only game in town?
Yeah, Congresswoman, with great respect, I do disagree with that. I believe that there are a lot of options. And some of them are not even listed on that chart. I just looked at it briefly, but I didn't see some that I know of, for example. So I think there are a lot of things.
Okay, thank you.
Dynamic.
All right, thank you for that.
There are more and
Mr.
more
Bezos,
every day.
my time is short. If Amazon didn't have monopoly power over these sellers, do you think they would choose to stay in a relationship that is characterized by bullying, fear, and panic?
With all respect, Congresswoman, I do not accept the premise of your question. That is not how we operate the business.
Okay. All right.
And in fact, we work very hard to provide fantastic tools for sellers, and that's why they've been successful.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bezos, I'm going to close with giving the bookseller the opportunity to finally be heard by you.
Mr. Bezos, we increased our sales on Amazon by 5 times in the past 3 years. And we have contributed that much of proportional seller fees to Amazon. We have contributed that much to your business to 5 times. We followed all the rules that were set by you. We please, just help us in earning a livelihood. We beg you. There are 14 lives at stake. Please, please, please help us get back on track.
With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Bezos, according to your testimony, the marketplace is competitive, but Amazon controls as much as 75% of all online marketplace sales. And eMarketer, a source you cited to us in submissions to this committee, reports that Amazon has nearly 7 times the market share of its closest competitor. Isn't it true that small businesses have no real option but to rely on Amazon to connect with customers and make online sales?
No, sir. With great respect, I do have a different opinion on that. I believe there are a lot of options for small sellers. I believe Amazon is a great one, and we've worked very hard. I think we are the best one.
Well,
we
Mr.
have
Bezos,
a lot of different programs that help sellers, but we are not the only option.
There are 2.2 million active sellers as of yesterday. About 37% of those sellers rely on Amazon as their sole source of income. That is over 800,000 people relying on Amazon to feed their families, put their kids through school, and keep a roof over their heads. Mr. Bezos, you have referred to third-party sellers as both your partners and customers. But isn't it true that Amazon refers to third-party sellers as internal competitors?
I think I wouldn't surprise me. In some ways, we are competing, and they're also competing with each other.
Well, that's right. Your own documents, Mr. Bezos, Amazon's own documents that you produce refer to the very same sellers that you've described as Amazon partners as internal competitors. In fact, we've heard from third-party sellers again and again during the course of the investigation that Amazon is the only game in town. One small business owner we interviewed described it this way, and I quote, "We're stuck. We don't have a choice but to sell through Amazon." Another said, and I quote, "They've never been a great partner, but you have to work with them." During this investigation, we have heard so many heartbreaking stories of small businesses who sunk significant time and resources into building a business and selling on Amazon, only to have Amazon poach their best-selling items and drive them out of business. So I want to talk to you about one company that really stood out from the rest. I want you to pay close attention to how they described your partnership, Mr. Bezos. We heard from a small apparel company that makes and sells what they call useful apparel for people who work on their feet and with their hands, like construction workers and firefighters. This particular business discovered and started selling a unique item that had never been a top seller for the brand. They were making about $60,000 a year on just this one item. One day they woke up and found that Amazon had started listing the exact same product, causing their sales to go to zero overnight. Amazon had undercut their price, setting it below what the manufacturer would generally allow it to be sold, so that even if they wanted to, they couldn't match the price. Here's how the apparel company described working with Amazon, and I quote, "Amazon strings you along for a while because it feels so good to get that paycheck every week. And in the past, for lack of a better term, we called it Amazon heroin because you just kept going and you had to get your next fix, your next check. But at the end of the day, you find out that this person who was seemingly benefiting you, making you feel good, was just ultimately going to be your downfall," end quote. So Mr. Bezos, this is one of your partners. Why on earth would they compare your company to a drug dealer?
Sir, I have great respect for you in this committee, but I completely disagree with that characterization. What we have done is create in the store a place. If you go back in time, we sold only our own inventory. It was a very controversial decision inside the company to invite third-party sellers to come into what is really our most valuable retail real estate, our product detail pages. We did that because we were convinced that it would be better for the consumer. It would be better for the customer
Bezos,
to have all of that selection. And I think we were right, and I think it's worked out well.
Reclaiming my time. Unfortunately, this is one of, reclaiming my time, Mr. Bezos, this is one of many small companies that have told us during this year-long investigation that they were mistreated, abused, and tossed aside by Amazon. Now, Mr. Bezos, you say that Amazon is only focused on doing what's best for the customer. You just said it again, and that also third-party sellers. But how is that possible when you compete directly with third-party sellers with your own products that undercut the competition? Isn't it an inherent conflict of interest for Amazon to produce and sell products on its platform that compete directly with third-party sellers, particularly when you, Amazon, sets the rules of the game?
Thank you. No, I don't believe it is. We have the consumer is the one ultimately making the decisions. They're making the decisions about what to buy, what price to buy it at, who to buy it from. And
that's not the question, Mr. Bezos. The question is there an inherent conflict of interest because you are a data company? You know when customers put something in their cart, when they take it out. Traditional brick and mortar stores like a grocery store where competition occurs don't have that. And so I just want to follow up finally on an answer to the question that you gave to Congressman Jayapal. You said that you can't guarantee that the policy of not sharing third-party sellers' data with Amazon's own line hasn't been violated. You couldn't be certain. Can you please explain that to me? Can you list examples of where that policy has been violated? Because it's particularly concerning to me, Mr. Bezos, that shouldn't third parties know for sure that data isn't being shared with your own line, their competitors? Why should a third party seller list their product on Amazon if they're just going to be undercut by Amazon own product as a result of data you take from them?
I think what I want you to understand, and I think it's important to understand, is that we have a policy against using individual seller data to compete with our private label products.
You couldn't assure Ms. Jayapal that policy isn't violated routinely.
Well, we are investigating that, and I do not want to sit here, and I do not want to go beyond what I know right now. But we are, as a result of that Wall Street Journal article, we are looking at that very carefully, and we want to get this back, and I will surely share them with you.
Thank you, and we look forward to that. The evidence we've collected shows that Amazon is only interested in exploiting its monopoly power over the e-commerce marketplace to further expand and protect this power. This investigation makes clear that Amazon's dual role as a platform operator and competing seller on that platform is fundamentally anti-competitive, and Congress must take action.
Mr. Bezos, our investigation uncovered documents that show that Amazon sometimes doesn't play fairly, crossing the line from robust competition to predatory pricing to destroy rivals rather than outcompete them. And let's take the example of Quidsi, which used to own Diaperscom and provided online baby care products. In 2009, your team viewed Diaperscom as Amazon's largest and fastest growing online competitor for diapers. One of Amazon's top executives said that Diaperscom keeps the pressure on pricing on us, and strong competition from Diaperscom meant that Amazon was having to work harder and harder so that customers didn't pick Diaperscom over Amazon. And the customers we're talking about were hardworking families, single parents with babies, and young children. Now, because Diapers.com was so successful, Amazon saw it as a threat. The documents that we've obtained show that Amazon employees began strategizing about ways to weaken this company. And in 2010, Amazon hatched a plot to go after Diapers.com and take it out. In an email that I reviewed, and we've got these up on the slides, one of your top executives proposed to you a, quote, aggressive plan to win, end quote, against Diapers.com, a plan that sought to undercut their business by temporarily slashing Amazon prices. We saw one of your profit and loss statements, and it appears that in 1 month alone, Amazon was willing to bleed over $200 million in diaper profit losses. Mr. Bezos, how much money was Amazon ultimately willing to lose on this campaign to undermine Diapers.com?
Thank you for the question. I don't know the direct answer to your question. This is going back in time, I think maybe 10 or 11 years or so. You could give me maybe the dates on those documents. But what I can tell you is that the idea of using diapers and products like that to attract new customers who have new families is a very traditional idea.
Sure, well, let's delve into this a little further. I'm sorry, I only have a few minutes here, so I just want to press on. Your own documents make clear that the price war against Diapers.com worked, and within a few months it was struggling, and so then Amazon bought it. After buying your leading competitor here, Amazon cut promotions like Amazon.mom and the steep discounts it used to lure customers away from Diapers.com, and then increase the prices of diapers for new moms and dads. Mr. Bezos, did you personally sign off on the plan to raise prices after Amazon limited its competition?
I don't remember that at all. What I remember is that we matched competitive prices, and I believe we followed Diapers.com. Again, this is 11 years ago, so you're asking a lot of my memory, but I believe we followed Diapers.com. I can also tell you after we bought Diapers.com, we put more than $300 million into trying to make it successful.
I'm sorry. So you said that Amazon focuses excessively on customers. So how would customers, especially single moms, new families, how would they benefit when the prices were driven up by the fact that you eliminated your main competitor?
Well, I don't agree, with great respect, I don't agree with that premise. At the same time, you should recognize in context, diapers is a very large product category sold in many, many places, not just at Amazon and Diaperscom.
This was the online diaper market. Now, we do have evidence that these predatory...
And Kroger
I'm sorry, Mr. Bezos, I need to push on here.
Of course,
the evidence we've collected suggests that the predatory practices weren't unique here. In 2013, it was reported that you instructed Amazon employees to approach discussions with certain business partners, and I quote, the way a cheetah would pursue a sickly gazelle. Is the Gazelle Project still in place, and does Amazon pursue similar predatory campaigns in other parts of its business?
In the 19th century, we had the robber barons. In the 21st century, we got the cyber barons. And we want to make sure that the extraordinary power and wealth that you've been able to amass is not used against the interests of democracy and human rights around the world, and not against the interests of a free market at home. So, Mr. Bezos, let me turn to you. I'm interested in the role that you play as a gatekeeper. A lot of consumers want to know when the HBO Max app will be available on your Fire device, and I understand that negotiations are ongoing, but that your company is not only asking for financial terms, but also for content from Warner Media. Is that right, and is that a fair way to proceed? In other words, is it fair to use your gatekeeper status role in the streaming device market to promote your position as a competitor in the video streaming market with respect to content?
I'm not familiar with the details of those negotiations. As you said, they're underway right now. I predict that the companies will eventually come to an agreement. And I think this is kind of two large companies negotiating agreement. It's kind of normal case of normal commerce.
But here's why I pursue it precisely, because it is a large company, and in a way, they stand in for hundreds of thousands of much smaller companies who are even in a more disadvantageous position with respect to negotiating with you. I guess the general proposition then you can speak to, if you don't know the details of this, which is it okay to negotiate not just for financial terms in having someone be part of your fire unit, but also to try to extract in that negotiation leverage with respect to getting content from them?
Well, again, I'm not familiar with the details. What I would
I'm not asking about that one in general. In general,
I think that when two companies are negotiating, you are negotiating not just the amount of money that's going to change hands, but also what you're going to get in exchange for the amount of money. That is a very fundamental way that business works.
Do you see at least to outsiders that would look like a structural conflict of interest, like you're using your control over access to people's living rooms, essentially. You're using that in order to obtain leverage in terms of getting creative content that you want. And are you essentially converting power in one domain into power in another domain where it doesn't belong?
I think what I should do is offer to get you information. I'll get it to your office for you, because I'm not familiar enough with this, and I could imagine that there would be scenarios, if we're just talking in the abstract, where it would be inappropriate, and I could imagine scenarios where it would be very normal business and very appropriate.
Fair enough. I want to talk about an emerging market, smart homes, and I want to start with the hub of the smart home, smart speakers. Does Amazon price the Echo device below cost?
Not its list price, but it's often on promotion, and sometimes when it's on promotion, it may be below cost, yes.
Well, several other companies did tell us, in fact, that Amazon is pricing Echo devices way below cost, making it nearly impossible for them to compete, and aggressively discounting Alexa-enabled speakers as a strategy to own the smart home. Like many markets we've heard about today, smart speakers with voice assistants like Alexa, along with the myriad of smart home appliances that Alexa can interact with, make up the next ecosystem or platform for tech companies to lock in customers. Would you say the smart home market, for which the Echo Ring security system and other smart devices operate, is a winners take all market? Yes or no?
No, I wouldn't, especially if we're able to succeed at what we want, which is we would like our vision for this is that smart home speakers should answer to different wake words.
Well,
so
when considering the acquisition of
on a case by case basis, and I think in that, just to finish, I think it's important. If we could achieve that, then I think you would get really good behavior on the part of competitive voice agents helping you.
When you were looking at acquiring Ring, you wrote to your executive team, quote, "We're buying market position, not technology, and that market position and momentum is very valuable." So if smart homes are not a market with lock-in effects, why would a leading market position and momentum be so very valuable?
Sir, market position is valuable in almost any business, and it's one of the primary things that one would look at in an acquisition. There are multiple reasons that we might buy a company. Sometimes we're trying to buy some technology or some IP. Sometimes it's a talent acquisition. But the most common case is market position, that the company has traction with customers, they've built a service, maybe they were the first mover. There could be any number of reasons why they have that market position. But that's a very common reason to acquire a company.
Well, once a company becomes dominant in a market, it can favor its own products and services. Alexa-enabled smart speakers make up over 60% of the smart speaker market. Mr. Bezos, when I ask Alexa to play my favorite song, Prime Music is the default music player. Is that right?
I think that's true if you're a Prime member, yes.
And a New York Times report found that when users say, "Alexa, buy batteries," Alexa responds, "Would you like to buy AA Amazon basic batteries?" So has Alexa ever been trained to favor Amazon products when users shop by voice?
The time of the gentleman has expired, but the witness may answer the question.
I don't know if it's been trained in that way. I'm sure there are cases where we do promote our own products, which is of course a common practice in business, and so it wouldn't surprise me if Alexa sometimes does promote our own products.
Mr. Bezos, Amazon has a significant problem with counterfeit products being sold on its platform. Counterfeit products not only rip off the owners of legitimate businesses, they also can be dangerous. Counterfeit medicine, baby food, automobile tires, and other products can kill. Amazon has said it's fixing its counterfeit problem, but counterfeiting seems to be getting worse, not better. Amazon is a $1 trillion company, but Amazon customers are not guaranteed that the products purchased on your platform are authentic. Amazon acts like it's not responsible for counterfeits being sold by third-party sellers on its platform, and we've heard that Amazon puts the burden and cost on brand owners to police Amazon's site, even though Amazon makes money when a counterfeit good is sold on its site. More than half of Amazon's sales come from third-party seller accounts. Why isn't Amazon more aggressive in ensuring that counterfeit goods are not sold on its platform? And why isn't Amazon responsible for keeping all counterfeit products off of its platform?
Thank you. This is an incredibly important issue and one that we work very hard on. Counterfeits are a scourge. They are a problem that is not, it does not help us earn trust with customers. It's bad for customers. It's bad for honest third-party sellers. We do a lot to prevent counterfeiting. We have a team of more than 1,000 people that does this. We invest hundreds of millions of dollars in systems that do this. We have something called Project Zero, which helps brands serialize individual products, which really helps with counterfeiting.
Well,
we have
I'm glad that you have those
as well.
I'm glad that you have those features in place, but why isn't Amazon responsible for keeping all counterfeit products off of its platform?
We certainly work to do so, Congressman, and we do so not just for our own retail products, but for third-party products as well.
Well,
and we
okay.
do work closely
Thank
with
you.
brands.
We've heard from numerous third-party sellers and brand owners that Amazon has used knockoffs as leverage to pressure sellers to do what Amazon wants. For example, the founder of Pop Sockets testified in January that Amazon itself was selling knockoffs of its product. After reporting the problem, it was only after his company committed to spending $2 million on advertisements that Amazon appears to have stopped diverting sales to these knockoffs. What is your explanation for that business practice?
That's unacceptable. If those are the facts, and that if someone somewhere inside Amazon said, buy X dollars in ads and then we'll help you with your counterfeit problem, that is unacceptable. And I will look into that and we'll get back to your office with that. What I can tell you is that we have a counterfeit crimes unit. We attempt to prosecute counterfeiters. I would encourage this body to pass stricter penalties for counterfeiters and to increase law enforcement resources to go after counterfeiters.
But your company does make money off of counterfeit goods being sold on your platform, isn't that correct?
If it does, in my view, sir, it would only be in the short term. We don't make. I would much rather lose a sale than lose a customer.
All right,
we make money because customers come back.
Fair enough, sir. Making companies pay extra to avoid having their products disappear in rankings seems to be so unfair, especially to small businesses. The American dream is threatened when that happens. Don't you think so?
Sir, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. If you're talking about what we were just talking about a second ago, I agree completely.
No, I'm talking about a totally different situation now, where a company that is selling on your platform but is not paying anything extra gets buried in the rankings. And but companies that pay extra are able to get their products pushed up and they avoid getting pushed down. Is that an acceptable practice?
Sir, I think what you're referring to is the fact that we offer an advertising service basically for third-party sellers to drive additional promotion to their products. That's a voluntary program. Some sellers use it, some don't. And it's been very effective at helping people promote their products.
Mr. Bezos, thank you for being here today. In your opening statement, I reviewed your written testimony. You indicated, and I'll just quote, that Amazon accounts for less than 1% of the $25 trillion global retail market and less than 4% of retail in the US. End quote. When you refer to retail, I take it based on the empirical studies I've reviewed, you're referring to a broad definition of retail that includes restaurants, bars, gas stations. So it's a fairly all-encompassing view of retail. I wonder if you know what percentage of Amazon's sales are represented in the terms of online retail sales, the e-commerce market stream.
The figures I've seen for, I don't, with all respect, I don't accept that e-commerce is a different market, but as a different channel, what I've seen is sort of 30 to 40% is the outside studies that I've seen where Amazon's share of that e-commerce channel.
And that's consistent with the data that I have seen. The latest figure I saw was 40%. And so in terms of how we define it, whether it's a stream or a channel, nonetheless, I do think that, just factually, it's important. It's an important distinction that I want to make sure we clear here. Obviously, I suspect you understand more than most that the early stages of a startup where entrepreneurs are undertaking risks to bring their products and services to market. Over the course of our investigation, we've heard directly from startups who rely on Amazon services, and that includes obviously Representative Jayapal's questions, Representative Buck, my colleague from Colorado, with respect to concerns about the way in which Amazon uses confidential information. But we've also heard that not just with respect to the marketplace, but Amazon's cloud computing arm, AWS, the notion that that computing arm essentially identifies startups' best technologies and rolls out replica products and services. So Mr. Bezos, does Amazon use confidential information that companies share via AWS to build competing services?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of. AWS does often, they do keep expanding their services. AWS started, 15 years ago. We invented this entire category.
Let me just clarify that, Mr. Bezos. I appreciate that. Sorry, I apologize for interrupting. But last week, one of Amazon's former engineers posted online that he and his team, quote, proactively identified growing businesses on AWS, that they built competing products, and that they targeted those products to the business's customers. And there's been public reporting on that strategy. So I guess I wonder if you can comment on that and how you would account for those statements.
Well, I think there may be categories, some databases of different kinds and so on, where we see that it's an important product for customers, and we make our own product offering in that arena. But it doesn't mean we stop servicing the other companies that are also making those products. We have competitors using AWS, and we work very hard to make them successful. Netflix is one example, Hulu is another, and so on.
I think the concern, Mr. Bezos, with respect is that the pattern emerges across the different components in Amazon, whether it's the marketplace or whether it's the cloud service, as I mentioned. In addition, there was an article, I'm sure you're aware, in the Wall Street Journal regarding the Alexa Fund, that according to news reports, Amazon's venture capital fund, the Alexa Fund, had invested in a number of different companies. I believe you're familiar with the Alexa Fund investing, for example, in Defined Crowd Corp. Does that ring a bell?
No, sir, I'm afraid it doesn't.
Okay, well, I'll represent to you, according to the Wall Street Journal, and I'll just quote from them, when Amazon Incorporated's venture capital fund invested in Defined Crowd Corp, it gained access to the technology startup's finances and other confidential information. Nearly 4 years later, in April, Amazon's cloud computing unit launched an artificial intelligence product that does almost exactly what Defined Crowd does, said Defined Crowd founder and chief executive Daniel Braja. Does that refresh your recollection? Are you aware of those allegations?
I read that article, but I didn't remember that piece of it. I apologize for that. I don't know the specifics of that situation, and I would be happy to get back to your office with more information about that.
Well, I would appreciate, I certainly would welcome that, and to the extent that you all can follow up with the subcommittee with respect to this particular article and the different episodes that are referenced, both in terms of Defined Crowd Corp. There's also another company called Nucleus that you may be familiar with. The reason why I ask these questions, the reason why it matters, Mr. Bezos, to me, is that we are very concerned about this innovation kill zone that seems to be emerging. I represent Boulder and Fort Collins, two of the fastest growing and most innovative tech hubs in the country, and entrepreneurs and founders shared their stories with this committee during one of our field hearings, actually a field hearing that we held at the University of Colorado Law School just earlier this year. And they are extremely dependent on big technology firms, including in terms of investment in capital, yet they live in constant fear that the platform platforms could steal their core technologies or ideas, making it impossible to compete because of those existing advantages. So I see my time has expired, but we will certainly be following up with respect to the episodes that I referenced.
In March 2020, Amazon announced that it was going to start delaying shipments of non-essential products in order to better serve customers and meet need while helping to ensure the safety of their warehouse workers. In practice, however, it appears that this policy was applied selectively as Amazon appeared to continue to designate its own products as essential, even as it delayed competing products from third-party sellers. So the essential items were supposed to include household staples, medical supplies, high-demand products, and that many factors were considered when determining eligibility to be essential. But we've had several employees report that Amazon continued to ship non-essential items like hammocks, fish tanks, pool floaties, et cetera. Mr. Bezos, were Amazon devices like Fire TV, Echo speakers, and Ring doorbell designated as essential during the pandemic?
I don't know the answer to that question. What I can tell you is that we had there was no playbook for this. We moved very quickly. Demand went through the roof. It was like having a holiday selling season, but in March, and we had to make a lot of decisions very rapidly. Okay. Our goal was to limit it to essential supplies, but I'm sure we did not do that perfectly.
Okay. I know the Ring doorbell has two competing products, including Arlo and Eufy, maybe. Do you know if they were designated as essential? I
do not.
Okay. Are you able to testify to Congress today whether Amazon's profit factor was a factor in giving an essential classification distinction?
No, not to my knowledge. We were working to achieve two objectives. One was to get essential products to customers, and the second was to keep our frontline employees safe. And we did a tremendous amount of work in both categories, and that's what we were focused on. We were not focused on profitability at that time.
Pushing out the elusive Clorox wipe, I guess. But at any rate, moving along, let's talk about the fees that Amazon charges sellers. According to a recent report, seller fees netted Amazon almost $60 billion in 2019, nearly double the $35 billion in revenue from AWS, Amazon's massive cloud computing division. 5 years ago, Amazon took an average of 19% of each sale made by a third party on its site. Today, Amazon keeps an average of 30%. Doesn't Amazon's ability to hike those fees so steeply suggest that Amazon enjoys market power over those sellers?
No, Congresswoman, I don't believe so. I think what you're seeing there when you see that go from 19 to 30% is that more and more sellers are taking advantage of the incremental services that we offer. And a big piece of that is fulfillment by Amazon, which is probably the greatest invention that we ever created for sellers. And it's working for sellers. That's why today 60% of sales are going through third-party sellers, up from 0 20 years ago.
Right, but I think a little more concerning is the 11% hike. Since 2014, Amazon's revenue from seller fees has grown almost twice as fast as its overall sales. So seller fees now account for 21% of Amazon's total revenue. Mr. Bezos, aren't seller fees now effectively subsidizing Amazon's retail division?
Congresswoman, no, I don't believe so. I think what you're seeing there, when you see these fees going up, what's really happening is that sellers are choosing to use more of our services that we make available. They are, previously perhaps they were shipping their own products from their own fulfillment centers. So they would have had costs doing that. If you're operating your own fulfillment center and buying transportation services to the customer through the Postal Service or through UPS or whoever it would be.
Okay,
you
let's
have
talk
fees
a little
anyway,
bit about
now
the fulfillment
doing that
centers.
With fulfillment by Amazon.
Right,
yes,
okay,
please, go
so
ahead.
we've got fulfillment by Amazon, and a year ago we asked whether a merchant who was enrolled in fulfillment by Amazon, also known as FBA, is a factor in whether they can be awarded the buy box, and at that time Amazon said no. But the evidence is indicating, and your own documents showing, that being enrolled in that program is a major factor, and it effectively forces sellers to pay for fulfillment services from Amazon if they want to make sales. Mr. Bezos, has Amazon's big buy box algorithm ever favored third-party sellers who buy fulfillment services from Amazon over other sellers?
I think effectively the buy box, maybe directly or indirectly, I'm not sure if it's direct, but indirectly, I think the buy box does favor products that can be shipped with Prime. So especially if you're a Prime member, the buy box is trying to pick the offer. If we have multiple offers from multiple sellers for the same item, customer wants to buy that item. The buy box is trying to pick the offer that we predict the customer would most like. That includes price, delivery speed, and if you're a Prime member, it includes whether the item is eligible for Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Bezos. I think my time's expired. Mr. Bezos, my colleagues have touched on counterfeit goods, and I share their concerns very deeply. I'm also concerned about stolen goods. Mr. Bezos, are stolen goods sold on Amazon?
Congresswoman, not to my knowledge, although we're more than 1 million sellers, and so I'm sure that there have been stolen goods sold on Amazon.
Really, Mr. Bezos?
I'm sorry.
There's not? You don't believe that there is? That surprises me.
No, I just said with over 1 million sellers, I'm sure that it has happened. But certainly, I don't think it's a large part of what we're selling.
Okay, so Mr. Bezos, basically then you're saying yes.
I guess so.
Okay, so I want to ask you about information that you require from sellers to prevent the sale of stolen goods. Do you require a real name and address, yes or no?
For sellers?
Once again, do you require a real name and address from sellers?
I believe we do, but let me get back to your office I'd rather give you the accurate answer, but I think we do.
Right. And I'm aware that you are. So yes, you do require a name and address. Do you require a phone number, yes or no?
I don't know if it's required. I think we often have it, but I don't know.
So briefly then, how do you verify that each of these pieces of information is accurate?
I don't know the answer to your question.
So you don't know how many people work on verifying seller verification before the seller is allowed to sell on Amazon?
No, Congresswoman, I don't.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you, sir, will you commit to reporting all sales of stolen and counterfeit goods to law enforcement and to victims to track large-scale offenders engaged in organized retail crime?
To the degree that we're aware of it, we will certainly pursue it. In fact, I would.
Sir, can you just make a blanket commitment? Can you just make a blanket commitment, whether you're aware of it or not?
A blanket commitment to what? Sorry, Congresswoman, I'm trying to be helpful.
Reporting all sales of stolen and counterfeit goods to law enforcement and to victims to track large-scale offenders engaged in organized retail crime.
I see no reason why, if we're aware of stolen goods, we wouldn't report it. We would want the correct law enforcement authorities to be involved.
Okay, thank you so much.